May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Paul asks the Romans. Not hardship, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, sword. Neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things yet to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, he answers, nothing whatsoever in all creation, Paul is telling us, will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. That's what holds us steady. It's the foundation on which everything else is built. And we may not always be aware of it, but it's that mustard seed of faith that can grow to shelter our highest aspirations and comfort our deepest pain. When I was reading these lessons over earlier in the week, trying to figure out what to say about them, I found myself thinking about something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How faith might relate to that model, especially in these distressful times. Abraham Maslow was an American psychology professor who developed a model of the ways human beings order their needs in life. In Maslow's understanding, the first things to be taken care of are physiological needs: food, water, place to rest, a way to keep warm. And then when those needs are secure, we try to fulfill sort of broader needs for basic safety beyond mere survival, security from violence, protection from accident, health care in case we're sick. And then once we feel both secure and safe, we turn to our needs, Maslow says, for belonging, for relationship, for intimacy and love. And with that belongingness secured, we look to enhance our self-esteem. We develop a sense of accomplishment and purpose and skill. And once we feel we've made our mark in our particular area of expertise, then for Maslow, the highest need in the hierarchy is addressed, which he calls self-actualization. It's a sense of creative fulfillment for each individual. And for Maslow, these needs are definitely sequential. There's an order to them that can't really be disrupted. If the more basic levels of need are disrupted or are threatened, our attention shifts back down. If, for example, we're being mugged while we're getting money out of the ATM, we're probably not thinking about our next professional accomplishment. And if we're crawling across the desert trying to find drinkable water, we may just not worry about achieving our full potential or whether our boyfriend or girlfriend is our true soulmate. So this idea makes sense in a lot of ways. And we can see this in this pandemic. We've been pulled back to concern about safety, sometimes concern about basic survival. And so our attention probably turns, at least in part, away from issues of higher purpose, and we'll sacrifice belongingness to the safety of quarantine. We'll calculate in ways we never have before whether or not the risk of doing one thing is worth the reward of doing another. And usually the strongest pull is at those basic levels. So I thought a lot these past 4 or 5 months of how this all impacts our faith and the work of our faith. Some articles that I read on Maslow's hierarchy puts church and other religious practices into the category of belonging. It sees it as equivalent of other friendships and membership groups, community groups, family, romantic relationships. And those are all parts of life that are good and important. But for me, seeing our religious life that way treats it as a kind of mid-level need that's neither basic to our survival nor fulfilling as a goal in life. And I think a lot of Christians look at the church exactly in that way. It's a part of their wider community and social life. And there is a social aspect to being the church, to being a part of a congregation. And we try to keep that going, even during these times when we have to be physically separated through phone calls to each other and regular weekly email maybe, and our great Zoom coffee hours following the service on Sunday. But for me, as I grow older, maybe a little bit more introverted, if not actually a little antisocial, I look to church for something more substantial than these relationships, as nice as they are, more spiritual than planning parish parties. I've never been really good as a kind of cruise director, pastor. It's a defect. It is a defect in parish ministry. Later in his life, though, Maslow himself re-examined his categories, and he began to teach that after self-actualization, there could be a higher calling that he saw as transcendence. Perhaps a transcendence of even the self-actualized self in an experience of unity beyond personal achievement, which sounds to me much more like how I relate with our religious tradition. And yet, if we simply add transcendence to this model of hierarchy, then it's hard to avoid thinking of transcendence as just another achievement. It remains kind of an afterthought as far as our needs go, a cherry on the sundae that you may or may not get to if the rest of your life were adequately being taken care of. And that's not what I pick up from Paul's description of his faith in the letter to the Romans this morning. his conversion was not some personal achievement, a graduate Pharisee school. It was a total transformation of his values, his goals, of his whole self-identity. If faith were just another step on our hierarchy of needs, whether you see that step as middle range of social connection or a culminating transcendent personal experience, either way, in theory, if it's either one of those things, it would not be available in times of threat to our security or our survival. And yet it's at those very times when we're pulled down into attention to our basic needs that most people sincerely turn to their faith for answers, for solutions, for other ways of seeing things. Faith, in my experience, can only really be accessed if we take our attention fully off our needs and open up to a broader context for our lives. And that move, that broader context, offers something special, something new, something from outside, beyond our control, that nevertheless shapes our experiences and guides our responses at whatever level draws our attention. Faith can be an aspect of transcendence, self-actualization, but it also brings a new perspective at times when security and in doubt for our safety when comes up, when issues of life and death are up for grabs. In faith, the point isn't to take care of each need and then go beyond to the next level. It's to bring whatever need we may be dealing with into a kind of dialogue with faith. To see it through the perspective of faith. Faith is not a solution to a problem. It's a vision of a larger reality in which all problems occur. It's a broader context for the whole of life. In faith, the meaning of our life isn't even found in our life. Paul tells us that it is not I who live, but Christ who lives in me that defines my real life. Spirituality, faith, meaning in life, all have to do with how our life connects with and impacts the rest of creation. It's a back and forth. It's always in relationship, but impacts both creation and creator, because faith is also a dialogue with God. We are, after all, each unique embodiments of God's Spirit in space and time. That's who we are. And our work there is beyond our own personal expression. It's God's life we're living. It's not our own life. It's not a private possession. Not only does faith impact our reaction to both existential threat or our transcendent experiences, it turns those responses, response to threat, response to transcendence, into our offerings to God, which are aspects of creation that only we can bring forth. And only God knows why. It's our gift. We're given our life moment by moment, and our responses to it all are the work of our life. So if anyone is putting their religious life on hold during this pandemic, they're really missing out on the one thing that can make this time tolerable and even profitable. God is still here. Faith and spirituality really keep on going with or without our awareness and active practice. There's nothing in all creation that can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Even our own distraction, even our own stubbornness, even our own self-centeredness, even our own sin. So bring your awareness to that seed of faith, however small it may seem to you, and it will grow. It will grow. This faith can transform any need into a sacramental event. This faith will give you shelter, like the limbs of a great tree. Thanks be to God.